We had 3 experts talking about what a decent living wage is and what we need to establish what we need to do to establish the current wages. So IDH, RSPO and ICIL were explaining in this session what kind of work they do in palm oil, but also in other commodities. It's very challenging to work towards a decent living wage, but it can be done. And what we need is a supply chain approach. All the different actors in the supply chain need to contribute to make it possible to have decent living wages for the workers. We've seen in other supply chains and we've learned that it's possible, but only if we have the contribution of all the supply chain actors. It's already in the principles and criteria of the RSPO, but now we need the stakeholders to step up and start implementing this criterion. I would like to hand over now to Connie to debrief on the first breakout session, which was on EU legislation to protect forests.
Thank you, and you see that we are actually sort of keeping social distance here in the studio. Now, the EU regulation was, of course, in the panel discussion, so we had about 130 attendees with many questions, but the big takeaway is, A, it is possible to have a regulation, a regulatory framework which combines both mandatory and also people and organizations working on their own free will. We had an outsider's view, in the sense that from the cocoa industry, an NGO was watching the processes, comparing what's going on there and here. And one of the takeaways was, of course, that you cannot have standalone situations for different commodities, but that especially on the deforestation-free aspects, you have to have something that encompasses all and therefore breaks it down. The question of who is going to finance all the increased necessary communication, the necessary legislation, and therefore the fulfillment, and so that we do not just fill in papers, but that it is actually going around. The good message is there is quite a lot of money and willingness to spend it from the Asian and African Investment Bank, World Bank, etc. PP. So that should not be the problem if the willingness is there to have the multi-stakeholder approach that has been working in the last couple of years, but that now has to extend. And the last question that is obviously quite important is the question about the involvement of smallhold farmers, and equally there are already initiatives on the ground to give them the voice in the multi-stakeholder approach, so that not each of the farmers needs to talk to the bigger organizations themselves. We are living in interesting times, and Nike is going to share the results of her breakout session.
Thank you, Connie. So I attended the breakout session on inclusive landscape approaches, where we had Ruben Blackie from PepsiCo talking a little bit more about what is happening in Aceh Tamiang in the verified sourcing area readiness pilot that is ongoing there, and why landscape approaches are important to them as a company. And Ruben especially went a bit more into the fact that within this readiness pilot, the targets are developed locally, really working on creating a sense of local ownership and why this is important. And then we also had Glyn Davies from WWF talking a little bit more about what's happening in Sabah, the state that has actually committed to being 100% RSPO certified by 2025. And Glyn also spoke about how continuous improvement here is important, and that actually MSPO is also playing an important role in moving the entire state towards RSPO. And we see that in both of these talks, what really comes forward is the importance of governance, of strong local governance, and how once you have this strong local governance, also we can really work on creating an inclusive approach where we really include all stakeholders in these landscapes. And now I'd like to turn over to Margot, our last colleague, who worked on the consumer session.
Thank you, Nienke. So, hello everybody. I find these conversations rich, and I missed also the some of the other breakout sessions that are very interesting. Note that we will be able to show them to you after the conference because everything is recorded. So our session was on closing the gap. I'm very proud to say that we're already at 86%. And a little problem is that the numbers are stagnating. So we discussed a bit about the gaps that there are there. So IDH was talking about the numbers, and then WWF was invited to speak about the new global scorecard of the palm oil buyers. And she talked about some of the problems that they face, for example, premium prices or the supply that is there. But she also talked about solutions and initiatives that you can join. So one of them is the POTC, the Palm Oil Transparency Coalition, and another one is the Sustainable Palm Oil Choice. And both are engaging several buyers or conservationist scientists, organizations to talk more about the impact of sustainable palm oil and to engage more people to join. So finally we had a discussion with Hans. It was very rich. I learned a lot, and he talked about a number of things that are new to me, but his main message is to really help the small farmers to get finance to do their job. So in the end, I think we all heard a lot about the hurdles that we face, but I say we go for the 100% sustainable palm oil in Europe and show the rest of the world. So go beyond Europe and show the rest of the world that it can be done. For now, I have to invite you to go to the next session. So you click back to program, and then you click on the consumer behavior session, and then we will talk about one of the hurdles, which is the image of palm oil in Europe and how we can tackle that, and some examples of companies that actually are doing this. Thank you.
So that was a very interesting and fast debrief of all the 4 breakout sessions. But as said before, all the sessions are recorded and will be shared with you after the event. For now, we go on with the next program item, which will be a consumer behavior session with speakers from Upfield, Tesco and Ferrero. So please click on program, choose the consumer behavior session, and I hope to see you there.